Sabbath. How would you describe your relationship with time? Well, it's a rhetorical question. But I want you to think about that. Struck a nerve, though. How would you describe your relationship with time? And what does Sabbath have to do with this picture? Two things to think about. Our culture gives us a number of ways of describing our relationship with time. Time flies. Or more fully, time flies when we're having fun. So go faster if you don't want to be bored. Time heals all wounds, unless it doesn't. So go faster if you want to heal. Time is a great teacher. I would say only if you want to be a great student. Here's a cynical one. Time is money. Some days we sit around and we kill time, which I would imagine as Mennonites, we don't feel good about. Time waits for no one. So go faster if you don't want to get left behind. Some of these ideas describe our orientation to time. Some of them even describe our orientation to violence, which seem to be one and the same. He doesn't use the word time, but it's embedded here. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, speed is the essence of war. The former gamer and streamer Dr. Disrespect would describe his life philosophy and gaming philosophy this way: violence, speed, momentum. We're given all sorts of relationships of our lives with time. How would you describe yours? And what does this picture have to do with time? Today, I want us to think about others, to think about time, to think about the system we live in, which is oriented towards domination, and then finally to think about delight. The scriptures teach us a healthier orientation to time in a way that's different than the aphorisms and cliches that we're often given. And the scriptures' admonitions to us are healthier because if we heed the commands that we're given, we have a healthier relationship with God and with each other. If you grew up playing sports, you surely heard that there is no I in team, followed by cheeky responses like, yes, but there is me in team. But I would like to offer a similar way that there is no I in Sabbath, that its fundamental nature is not about you. Who should refrain from working? The commands in Deuteronomy remind us that you should refrain from working. So maybe there's a lowercase I in Sabbath. But the list goes on. Who should refrain from working? Do not make your son or daughter work, a male or female servant, your ox or your donkey, any livestock, any stranger from another land. Deuteronomy 5 reminds the Israelites and us, but it reminded them especially that they were slaves in a foreign land, that God set them free, and in the same way that their households, including their servants, ought to rest too, because rest is a form of freedom. Exodus laid the groundwork of Sabbath, that we rest because God rested. Deuteronomy lays the groundwork that God allowed Israel to rest from slavery, and therefore all people, all creatures, all land, all are invited to rest. Next slide. Rob, could you read this for us? There is no I in Sabbath, but there is an ah. Sabbath is about other people. So, as Rob reminds us, so what is your relationship to time? Which should beg the question, what is your relationship to other people? This morning, I've been asked to speak about work and Sabbath. And the main idea, as I see it, is to refrain once a week from making others work for you. And in a 24/7 economy that asks big questions of us, should we consolidate all our deliveries on one day to give the Amazon driver a break? Should we shop on Saturday so that we can bring the food for small group on Sunday without making somebody work? Like just little practical things that you start thinking about. And next slide. Kimberly, could you read the first one, please?
Not to own, but to give, not to control, but to share, not to subdue, but to be in accord. Life goes wrong when the control of space, the acquisition of things of space become our sole concern.
Thank you very much. Abraham Joshua Heschel is perhaps the most significant voice in the 20th century, a profound ally with MLK in the pursuit of civil rights for all people. He was invited into the theological modernization of the Catholic Church called Vatican II, someone profoundly embedded in relationship with all sorts of people. He's perhaps most well known for his writing on Sabbath, and he clarifies what Sabbath is and what it's for. And he describes the world we live in, that 6 days a week we live in the world of space. And space is a time where we're often oriented towards control, or to own, or to have, or to do. But he invites us into a seventh day, which is not about space, it's about time. Ty, could you read the next one? Heschel gives a really neat picture, and it has to do with the picture that we saw at the beginning. Does anyone know what that picture was or is? It's the Palace of Versailles. For Heschel, he sees that on the seventh day we create, we build, or perhaps we experience as an atmosphere. Maybe that's less work-oriented. We experience as an atmosphere time, as a palace. And when we get out of space orientation, which is about to control, to own, to have, and we emerge into time, we can be, and we can give, we can share, we can delight, we can enjoy. There's a different orientation to space than there is to time. And we must work on that orientation to be and to give and to share. And the picture is very clear that God is enthroned in a palace, and we are there. And God enthroned has a kingdom that is for all. Time is an eternal palace. God is there, and all are invited to delight. Which begs a question. What sort of palace do we live in? Who do we see enthroned on what type of throne? And God's palace of time that we're invited in is not the typical throne room that we may experience. Next slide, please. This is a painting by the English artist George Watts. What do you see? Not a rhetorical question.
Indifference.
This is a devastating piece of art from George Watts. Domination, subjugation, greed, power over, gilded robes, enscolled throne, a pouch of riches. This is a painting called Mammon by George Watts. And Mammon sits on a throne. And it's a throne oriented towards control and to have and to own. It's the world of space that Heschel says on Sabbath we need to break out of so that we enter into the palace of time, which is God's orientation to all, which is about sharing and giving of one another to each other in love and being. Remember, Jesus says, you cannot serve both God and mammon. I agree. You too. This is what time as money looks like. One warning. Well, so we're given these commands to keep the Sabbath. And I want us to be careful with that, because Jesus teaches me to be careful with that, because Sabbath rules themselves can become tyrannical. So many stories in the Gospels where Jesus heals a man on the Sabbath and says, pick up your mat and walk. And one of the many prohibitions so that you don't work on the Sabbath is that you don't carry anything. And so the man picked up the mat and walked, and then the Pharisees were angry that the man broke the Sabbath. When Jesus showed what the Sabbath is, it's giving, it's sharing, it's delighting in wholeness. And the Pharisees missed it because they were so oriented to the rule. So I don't really have 10 tips on how to keep the Sabbath or 10 rules to keep the Sabbath. But I want us to think about our relationship to time, which begs the question of our relationship to each other, so that we can be invited into Jesus' kingdom for all people rather than the kingdom of Mammon. Isaiah 58, if you have your pew Bibles, I invite you to turn quickly to, not quickly, gosh, take your time. Page 568. 568. That was my angst talking. That's so strange. We're going to get a window into the throne room of Mammon and then end with the throne room of Sabbath. Isaiah in this chapter is describing true and false worship. And false worship is when you do things like fasting so that maybe you can like influence God to finally listen to you. But all the while you're yelling at people around you or you're treating other people poorly. He describes that in the beginning portion of chapter 58. But here's what true fasting is, starting with verse 6, down at the bottom of 568. Isn't this the fast I choose? Releasing wicked restraints, untying the ropes of a yoke, setting free the mistreated, and breaking every yoke? Isn't it sharing your bread with the hungry and bringing the homeless poor into your house, covering the naked when you see them and not hiding from your own family? Then your light will break out like the dawn, and you will be healed quickly. Your own righteousness will walk before you, and the Lord's glory will be your rear guard. So he establishes what true worship is, which begs the question of our relationship to one another. But fascinating at the very end of chapter 58. So jump down to verse 13. This is how Isaiah wraps it up. So if you stop trampling the Sabbath, stop doing whatever you want on my holy day, and consider the Sabbath a delight, sacred to the Lord, honored, and honor it instead of doing things your way, seeking what you want and doing business as usual. Then you will take delight in the Lord. So Isaiah deeply asks us to deeply consider our relationships to others, especially are we falling for the temptation of the throne room of Mammon to own, to have, to do? And can we release that and in the process release others from the captivity that we hold them and be invited into the Sabbath throne room of God, which is true worship? One more time. Next slide. And can I ask you if you could read this for us?
One must be overawed by the marvel of time to be ready to perceive the presence of eternity in a single moment. One must live and act as if the fate of all of time would depend on a single moment.
Last idea. That Heschel invites us to think about Sabbath delight as something that we are seeking to cultivate an awe within us. Rather than cultivating a life where we are so wrapped up in the rat race and work, 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 or I think as the scriptures imply, even worse, making other people work, work, work for us, that we enter into the sacredness of each present moment and cultivate an awe for being in that time. So Heschel says, be ready to perceive the presence of eternity right now. To practice Sabbath, perhaps it's helpful to root out any practices at least once a week that keep you from such a perception. And that's your work to do. I can't give you the rule for that or what that is in your life. But the invitation is to think about what's keeping me from the perception of God's presence, of eternity, of the life of giving and sharing right now. I do not check work email on the weekends. But sometimes I do check my 401k balance to see if I can retire in 12 years. And even though I only really started saving for retirement when I was 40, I knew I'd be disappointed before I even looked. And then I look and I'm disappointed. And so quickly, I'm transported not into now, but into a future of lack, which tempts me to not trust God that it'll be okay. So there's some work to do for me to perceive the presence of eternity, of rest, of being, not having. And it's our job to cultivate that perception of eternity, which is life in the Spirit, and avoid the perception simply of space around us to control, to have, to own. I'll end with this. Several weeks back, David Gist shared about his time on the Camino de Santiago. And my wife Esther and I walked a route of the Camino 2 years ago. And it was transformative. I mean, it's not automatically transformative. No experiences are magic. But for 14 days, Esther and I walked, and we didn't really talk to each other during the daytime. We kind of debrief at dinner. But it was a 14 days oriented towards silence, towards listening, towards prayer, which is not a normal habit for me. And the outgrowth of that experience was a profound gratitude, especially for relationships in my life, with Esther, with our 4 daughters. I didn't think about a woeful retirement account. I didn't think about the cost of sending 4 kids to college. I didn't think about the ideological wrestlings that I have with people at my work. I was so transformed into practicing a presence of eternity, which just led to such an odd thanks. And I have to tell you, this is not my doing, so I don't want this, I'm not the hero of this, but it's been like a 2-year experience, I have to say, of Sabbath over the last 2 years. That as I am deeply embedded in a relationship with my wife and my daughters, that I'm just so darn thankful to share life with them. And I'm just so proud of my kids. No, I was proud of my kids before 2 years ago, but there was just something about this giving of time and orientation that left its mark on me that still is rippling. And so my invitation to you is whatever you're called and however you're called to cultivate that sense of presence, of God's eternity, of God's presence, of your giving and receiving in love. I think that's what Sabbath is. So to quote the song that we sang earlier, let my life be an incense to you, O Lord, that we stop and we light an incense stick and we sit in the backyard and we just offer our lives to the Lord, right? To be in that sacred moment. I hope the Lord has led you to think something about your orientation to time, and may He lead you in the time that we have. Amen.
Thank you, Brett. Let's just sit with what Brett has shared with us today. Let that sink in. Ponder if there are any reflections that are surfacing for you. Now we'll have a time of congregational response. Alma's already responding, but we'll wait for a few moments. We'll wait for a few moments just to allow your spirit to really sit with what Brett has shared. If there's anything that resonates deeply for you, anything that challenges you, we'll have a few minutes to share that with one another. For us as Mennonites, the sermon isn't the last word, but is part of an ongoing conversation. So take a few moments just to let those words from Brett percolate.